After e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and bishop e5, the Spanish opening is on the board. You go on with f5. And in this video, we're going to look at something that we haven't seen before. One of the lines we need to see is after pawn take in e4, in f5, we have seen that now we need to go on with e4. What we haven't seen yet is what happens when the white player makes a decision to immediately take the knight in c6. In one of the previous videos, we went through queen to e2, now pinning the pawn, and then we play queen e7, and then bishop takes, and then pawn takes back. And that's how the situation looks like. The white knight was able to go to the square d4. So what's different now? Let's restart. The difference here is that the swap of bishop takes knight happens almost immediately. So pawn takes and now e4, and now, right now, white takes this knight. We still take with the d pawn. The difference is this is slightly weaker for the white player because now the white player doesn't have the possibility to go to d4 with the knight. So the move we're going to look at is the following one. Knight to e5. Now we obviously take the pawn in f5. And here, let's pay attention. We're going to look at three options. Let's pay attention to the fact that queen to h5 is not a thing. You can simply play g5. And you don't have to worry about queen e5 check attacking the rook for the simple reason. Knight takes, okay, bishop takes, that's it. White lost a piece. Queen to e5 check doesn't work because of the crucial king to f7 move, and that's it. There's nothing to worry now. Queen to h8 is immediately punished with bishop to g7. The queen is trapped. So let's do it from the start so that we don't get confused about what's going on. f5, right? And we're looking, first of all, we're looking at pawn takes, and now e4. Bishop immediately takes our knight. We take with the d pawn, allowing the queen to attack this d file. So knight e5, and now recapture the pawn in f5. Black is better developed than white, and that's why he had to be very careful. So let's look at this variation now. d3. The white knight is defending the square d3, and the white player doesn't want this pawn to become real strong. And if you keep watching this video, you'll realize how insanely strong this pawn in e4 is. So if white challenges it immediately with d3, black plays queen to d4, one of the thematic moves in this position. The queen's attacking the knight. The knight's got nowhere to go except one square, or actually two squares, where there's c4 as well. But either way, even in, let's say, c4, the white player just loses control of the square d3. We're just gonna play pawn takes, and after take, we got bishop in d3, stopping the opponent from castling, attacking the knight. It's a terrible situation. Let's make an example. Pawn takes. Here the most accurate move actually, but bishop d3 was also fine, is long castle. This is to avoid potential annoying checks. But still, now we got enough pressure on this pawn. Position evaluated -3, which is crazy because it will basically already up a piece according to the engine. So let's familiarize with it even more. Here, take e4 and now take. Okay, take knight e5. We retake this pawn and we mentioned d3. Okay, queen to d4 attacks the knight. What happens if the knight doesn't go to c4 but rather g4? Doesn't make much difference. You realize that you're winning this game. Just take the pawn in d3. So you remove the knight from the defense of that square, and there is absolutely nothing here. We got two attackers over the knight. We are going to win a piece. If white plays, let's say, h3 to protect the knight, queen e4 check, game over. The king can't go anywhere because we got double attack. Let's say he goes here, pawn to c2 attacks these two. Will be winning a piece. King goes, I don't know, if white blocks, still you can always, no matter how white blocks, even if he blocks with the knight, either way you always are able to take in c2 with the capture of a piece. If the king moves, this is even worse because you're able to play long castle and come with a crashing attack. So in this position we've just played f5, take e4, and then take with the d pawn, knight e5, and then we recapture the pawn in f5. What happens after simply castle? Okay, now we realize how this pawn in e4 is our greatest asset. It's really strong. Queen to d4 happens once again. The only move for the white player now is knight to g4, the only square which is defended by someone, in this case the queen. Knight to f6 comes now, and as there's a lot of attack over that square, we're also able to play h5. This is an bishop d6, long castle. It's a fantastic way to play. Knight takes, okay, take with the queen. Looks like we're giving white a tempo, but in reality we're just making it easier for us, because now that the knight is no longer near the king side, the opponent king side, we're gonna have all of these pieces lining up on the opponent king side. So rook e1 now attacking the pawn, putting pressure on the pawn. You just castle. d3 is never possible, because d3 won't be able to really attack the pawn in e4. There's no way out now. d3 will be taken. Queen to e2, because there's nowhere else to go. We always have a possibility to play bishop c5 and put pressure on f2. So queen to e2. The pawn in e4 is too strong. Bishop to c5 stops ideas like f3, but either way you could also just take. Knight to c3, let's say develop, doesn't matter. Rook h to f8, development of the black player is perfect. Too much pressure on f2, we're gonna win because of that. If white plays now knight to a4, attacking the bishop, we don't want to play bishop d6, this knight will be very happy to take us. Bishop to d6, putting pressure on h2. And now finally let's see what happens if white plays f3, which is an idea, and we can't really play bishop c5. And it's an idea to remove this insanely strong pawn. Well, too late. Queen to h4 wins for black. We're threatening to go to the square h2 with a crashing attack. This cannot be stopped. g3, for instance, you just sacrifice. And pawn takes back, queen takes back. If the queen protects like this to g2, you win the rook. If not, the king, let's say, moves. You can do anything you want here. At this point, you can play rook f6, rook h6. The most accurate move, though, is pawn takes in f3 with an attack on the queen. Queen to f1, keeping defense of the rook, but now bishop to h3 attacking the queen. Queen to g1, but bishop g2 ends the game. So from the start we need to see something that has been giving me a free problem lately, so we're going to see how to deal with this. After f5, white can choose to immediately castle and give up the pawn in e4 for development. This is really dangerous. Now here we do take the pawn in e4, and after bishop takes, pawn takes, knight can take in e5. It's similar, this is the motif of this video, something similar, but it's not the exact same, because we don't have a bishop in f5. Anyway, we play the thematic queen to d4 here. We don't need to play bishop in f5, there's nothing to capture. Queen to d4 attacking the knight. And again, same stuff. The knight might go to g4, but then we have similar motifs. What happens after this attack? We'll look at all the ideas. Queen to h5. This you can just meet it with g6. And there is no sacrifice. There is nothing here. The queen will have to move again. So let's say queen to g5. Our best move now is bishop to f5, creating a very similar situation as before. And now the bishop is basically obstructing the defense of the knight. So we're threatening to win the knight for free. So when the knight moves to g4, only move bishop to e7, harassing the queen like a rejected woman will harass her ex-boyfriend. Queen to f4 to still remain in the defense of the knight in g4. Bishop to d6 is the most accurate move. Queen back to g5. And now h5 attacks the knight. The knight's got nowhere to go except knight to e3. And now queen to e5. This is such a torture against the white player, because every move we make is a threat, and now we're threatening mate. g3 to stop that. Bishop to e7 attacks the queen. Where's the queen gonna go? The only move will be queen to f4. And after take, knight to f6. Now obviously knight takes, pawn takes, it just helps us to reunite the pawn structure and allows us to build up a battery of rooks on the open file. So we're going to go through knight c3. Black's first move in this case is bishop to h3. And after rook to e1. This doesn't look any too bad for the white player, but I mean it does look bad, but not that bad. Black goes on with g5. The idea is to open the files. And after white takes, attacking the knight, obviously you know where this is going. Rook g8 comes now. And this is a fantastic endgame for black to play. King to h1, now simply recapture the pawn in g5. After the best move by white will be rook to g1. Take. And long castle stops the white player from being able to play the d pawn and develop the bishop. So let's go back a couple of moves here. Instead of rook g1, what happens if the white player plays the d pawn already to develop this bishop instead of rook g1, and then maybe bishop d2 and then rook g1 in order to connect the two rooks. Okay, take the pawn en passant. Pawn takes back, the pawn is isolated. Now the best move is rook to g7. In fear of the move knight e4, basically forcing us to give up the knight and reuniting the pawn structures. We want these two pawns to remain like that. So now white plays bishop to d2 to connect the rooks, and after long castle, we're going to attack on this pawn. And rook to g1. Believe it or not, the best move is rook to f7. Basically, we don't want to swap because we want to keep putting pressure on the pawn in d3 and win the extra pawn rather than swapping. Rook to g3, developing the rook, preparing to double up and attacking our bishop in h3. Simply met with rook takes in d3, and after rook takes bishop and rook takes bishop, we got equal material and better pawn structure. Position evaluated as if black was up a piece though. Besides, we got an attack on these two and they can't defend each other. Unless white makes a backwards move like knight to c3, knight c3 to d1. But then rook to f8, preparing the rook to come back into the game. King to g1, protecting this pawn, potentially allowing the white player to keep developing the pieces. Still, knight to e4 should capitalize on this pawn. f3 to stop that from happening. Knight to g5 attacks the rook, should win the game because the rook can't move. The rook can take the pawn, yeah, but you also have knight f3, it's deadly move. Rook to g3 still, knight f3 is the best move. And the last thing I'm going to show before closing this video is where bishop b5, f5, and now d3. So we have also seen this move extensively in the previous videos, but something we haven't seen is after pawn takes, what happens after the immediate capture of our knight. Take with the b pawn, and now knight takes in e5, so that's the motif of the video. So queen to f6 comes now with an attack on the knight, so this knight is very weak. So now we're going to go on with d4. What happens if instead white plays knight to g4, attacking the queen? Okay, black plays queen to h4, and now it looks like the white player might be able to actually take the pawn in e4. Okay, d5. Now we got double attack on the knight. Something has to be done. f3 cannot happen, so h3. Because the knight decided not to go to e3. Okay, well, h5 makes it happen. Knight to e3 has to happen now, and this stops the development of the dark horse bishop, as you saw in previous example, and we can take the pawn in e4. So, castle. Bishop to d6, and after knight to c3, looks like the white player might be able to develop the pieces normally, but actually not. Queen to g6 comes now, idea of bishop h3 and all that. This cannot be stopped. White's best idea here is something that we haven't been able to see so far because the white player was never able to play, but now seems like it could be, is f6. The idea obviously is to play f5 and finally conquer some more space and play a decent game. Knight to e7 is the key move now. You don't want to play bishop h3 because of f5. The knight's protecting f5 and it's also protecting g2. Knight to e7 puts more defense over this square. It's too dangerous. And after the development of the queen, it looks like white is doing just fine. But in reality, it's not like that. See, black castles, and now we have a direct threat on this square. So after f5, because the queen had nowhere else to go if you think about it, because you'd be winning material anyway. f5 doesn't work, you can just take. You also have a bishop, don't forget. Position evaluated as if black was already up a piece. There's nothing else to do here. White's best move according to the engine is knight to e2. Desperate for swap probably, maybe going to g3 with the queen. Still dropping a pawn at least. Bishop a6 comes, pinning the knight to the rook. So after rook to f2, rook a to e8, and now we are perfectly developed. Queen to g3 now asking for swap. This doesn't work because of the loose pieces, so look for tactics. Bishop takes. Here you can't take back because the white queen is under attack. So after queen takes our queen, we take back, rook takes back, and now the knight is playing, so knight f4, and also d4 potential ideas. If rook goes to f2, considering that, you know, maybe wants to unpin the knight, d4 will not be very good anymore. I mean, in a way that doesn't win a piece, but still d4 is the best move. After knight to c4, we have the deadly check. The rook will have to block, but if the king moves, for instance, yeah, the knight's attacking the bishop, but still, knight h3 is the best move. Beautiful. See, the knight can't really take the bishop. I mean, he can, but then you can also take the rook, you're completely winning. If the king escapes the check by taking the rook, then this is mate. So the very last line will be the following. 5, and then d3, okay, take. Okay, take. Bishop takes knight, we take with the b pawn. And now after the knight takes in e5, play queen to f6. So earlier we went through what happens after knight g4, what happens after d4. Solidifying the knight in the center. Okay, develop, knight e7. Castle, d6 attacking the knight's defending c6, so the knight will have to go. Knight to g4, queen to g6, all very similar. Knight to a3 having to move because we're also going to play h5 anyway. Knight to f5, we want to swap. And now there's already no coming back. White cannot really just develop, let's say knight c3. Because here you will just take this knight, and after the swap has happened, you can play bishop h3. You're winning material, winning a rook. You can say what happens if the pawn takes instead of the bishop. Here it looks like bishop h3 doesn't work because queen e2, maybe rook f2 stops the checkmate. Here you go on with d5. And after the development, queen e2, idea of maybe playing bishop d2. The thing is, here we have the bishop pair, and that's our advantage. We don't have like a massive advantage here at all. I mean, it's like -2 at this point. You play bishop to d6, and there is basically nothing that our opponent can do to make the pieces join the game. Let's say bishop to d2 with the idea of bishop e1, because this bishop is actually very weak. Our two bishops here are too strong. Queen to h6 comes now, and bishop e1 is already not possible because we have the attack on h2. So g3 to stop that, queen to g6. There's nothing to do. The white knight has nowhere to go, and even if he were to go a4 and then c5, from there it's attacking nothing. Let's look at what happens with the plan of doubling up the rooks on the f file. Rook f2, h5, we're going to play h4, so rook f1, h4, and it was inevitable. Position evaluated around -4 at this point. So let's look at another line. And we're going to look at it from the start, of course, because you see, if you watch all these videos, if you've come so far, following me and watching the saga on how to beat the Spanish opening, you must be really good against it now. So d3, take, and after the bishop takes, take with the b pawn in this case. Knight takes in e5, queen f6 attacking the knight, d4. Knight e7 comes, and after castle, d6. Knight to g4 only move, queen g6. Knight to e3, all these are forced moves. Knight to f5, we're happy to swap and to develop the bishop. Earlier we went to knight c3, it's wrong. Let's see what happens after a normal developing move. Rook to e1. Okay, knight to h4. Putting pressure on g2, also threatening knight f3, winning the exchange. So if white plays, let's say knight to c3 for instance, knight f3 check, king moves, knight takes rook, knight, queen takes back, d5. That's it, there's absolutely zero compensation. In this position after knight h4, what happens if white plays king to h1 already? Okay, bishop e7, and after rook to g1. Remember, this is how strong the pawn in e4 is. g3 will give us the knight in f3 sitting like a god will be sitting at its desk. This knight here is too strong, especially putting the pressure in h2. So g3 can never happen without creating a permanent weakness. Castle. after rook g1 castle. And there's no coming back here. There's nothing to do for the white player. You see, for example, d5, an idea of, obviously you don't want to take because that gives a lot of activity to white. You just play c5, you block the game, right? Don't memorize moves, remember the patterns. There is nothing here. f3 can never be played because you can just take. It creates a permanent weakness. The bishop has nowhere to develop that makes sense because knight e3 is a big problem for the white player. We also have a threat of playing rook to f2. Let's see what happens after knight f1. Idea of maybe going to g3 and start putting pressure on e4. Still, bishop to g4 here wins the game. There is no coming back. Pawn blocks doesn't make sense because you can take. Pawn takes back. You go bishop takes with check. Our opponent will be forced to give up the queen. And we will have to swap for the rook, but we're winning a lot of material. Queen moving away doesn't work because of knight f3 trapping the rook. It's a beautiful move. If pawn takes and bishop takes, it's game over very soon. And in this position, it's not like knight. Of course, knight f1 is a bad move, but if white plays, let's say knight to c3, then obviously play something else. You win this pawn. You see how the position of the white player is terrible. Queen to e1 maybe instead of knight c3. Okay, bishop to f6. Stopping the development of the light square bishop. Okay, knight to c3 now. Bishop a6, stopping the knight from going to the annoying b5 square. Bishop develops. It looks like white might be able to potentially play a normal game, but he's completely closed. There's no open files or anything for white. White can't really move anything without losing the game. See, moving the g pawn means you play knight f3 making a fork. Moving this pawn, you can take it. White will have to play moves like a3, b3, a4, just zugzwanging around, hoping for something to happen. There's no squares to go for the knight. Let's say f5, g4. None of these are acceptable. None of these do anything. Knight a4 is not going anywhere. Basically, not making a single threat. So black's best move now is rook a to e8. Let's see, white will play something like a3 or maybe a4. Just remember the key squares you're controlling and just mess around with the pieces. You are now able to play rook to f7, preparing to double up after white plays a4. And after, let's say, rook b1, so the white can push this pawn in peace and hope for some waking up of the white pieces. Say b4, maybe take. But now black simply doubles up the rook. Okay, so b4. Does this work even? Bishop e5. We got a lot of attack over f2. We are going to go there no matter what. The rook protecting in f1 doesn't help, simply because he will take back. And here white can't just, take the pawn here in order to finally be able to activate one of his pieces. Although the rook, where can the rook go? Basically nowhere. But it's just too late. Now here black can play bishop takes in h2. And the king is too stuck after taking back because of the attack on the rook. Queen h6 is checkmate to follow very soon. And in this position, if white had played h3, this wouldn't have changed much. White might have an idea of playing h3, g4, to be honest. But now black ends the game with knight f3. It's a fork, so after take, queen to h6 is deadly.